Statesman Edmund Burke may have once described the press and media as the fourth estate. Separate from the clergy, the nobility, and the masses, the fourth estate holds the power to drive public opinion through its reporting of the country's day-to-day events.
Sabi nga ni Uncle Ben, now with great power comes great responsibility. With such a great power of being listened to by everyone, how does the press hold up to the responsibility of not including chaos and manifesting harm to the people? Bias media, number 2.
May bigat ba ang A-bias CBN, Lafler at iba't ibang pangalan para sa bayarang media? Katkat's back in town at may mga kasinungalingan kailangang halugugin.
Are you ready? Kabataan, it is now time. Now, Youth Talk.
How do I reconcile my loved one's political
How do we
differences?
campaign in a
How do
pandemic?
we engage our candidates?
How do we
What
talk to
if
our
I don't
community?
like my elected officials?
How do you respond to respect my opinion?
It is now time for the voice of the youth to be heard. Now, Youth Talk.
Kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ang mananaig. Oras na tayo na, boto mo'y mahalaga. Kung hindi ngayon kikilos, kailan pa ba?
Ayan, magandang araw, hapon, na nasan man kayo sa ating Philippine political landscape. I just want to say, what an introduction. I loved it.
Yeah.
It's such a great intro. And sana all, I hope you, Migo, I hope everyone listening today, sana we are all living and flourishing in this alert level 1 weather. This is Zandy, together with the incredible Migo, hosting this very special episode of Now Youth Talk, 2022's most important conversations discussed.
So time check naman tayo dyan. It is now time for the voice of the youth to be heard. So 40 million members of the youth are set to vote on May 9th, 2022. Whether or not you are part of that demographic, this election is, with no exaggeration, the defining event of our generation.
Tama ka dyan. So join us in these critical election months as we go through a mind-boggling list of 2022's most important conversations. We're here to hear you out. Now, Youth Talk. Each episode, we read out a letter from our audiences. So, think of it as like a conversation playing out in your head. So you'll be ready to know what to say when you encounter these in real life.
All right, so for these special episodes, we're flipping the script with a special letter sender naman. So yes, dear viewers, at this critical time, when we have to make the most critical decision of our upcoming 6 years, sadyang hindi na mapakali ang ating letter sender sa nakikita niyang disinformation sa larangan ng social media at mga tsikahan natin in real life. So yun, Zandy, before we proceed to our letter sender, speaking of disinformation, what's a significant piece of disinformation that you've encountered?
Goodness,
Ikaw.
ang dami. I feel like, it's
Diba?
like, pressure ako. Ang dami na mga pasok sa utak ko right now. But, you know what? I will just say, it's not disinformation. And I'm glad it wasn't disinformation. Pero, speaking of Uncle Ben kanina, when they talk, I think we're allowed to say this now, when they talked about having 3 Spider-Mans in the film,
Yeah.
it's not disinformation, but I will just say, I'm so glad that wasn't fake news. But back to the
Yes.
right? It was just like, yes, like, just watching the film, you're just like, yeah, good thing hindi yun disinformation. But I think for me, the biggest disinformation, especially now, yung may chip daw yung vaccine.
Yeah.
In this
Yeah.
political climate, I was surprised. I'm like, I might chip siya. I wonder how that works out. But yeah, that was the biggest disinformation that I have received personally. But in the previous episode, Migo, you also shared about your the biggest
Yeah.
disinformation you've encountered, which is Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think hoaxes are like so scary, right?
I mean, ako mismo, I've believed it a bunch of times with Mr. Bean and yung kay Spider-Man. Like, alam natin na even though we were spoiled with it, it was still a surprise when we saw it on screen, right? So,
Yeah, it
surprise
was.
friends, sobrang goosebumps. Like, you wouldn't really believe that it's really happening in real life. It's like a meme that
I
came
know
into
it is.
life.
I know.
Straight out the
And
picture.
Yeah, in the picture they even did the picture,
Yeah.
which was like my happy moment. I feel like Migo also you. I can see that Spider-Man um thingy
In the
behind you. I
background,
feel
yeah.
like you are happier than me by
Yeah,
a
yeah.
few 100%,
Yeah,
right?
I
But
bought
we
it.
that's
I
great, and
mean,
I feel like it suits you very well.
mm, actually, I bought it nung peak times pa ng Spider-Man. So I could really feel the Spidey senses in me while watching the movie. So sobrang, it's one of my best purchases ever. And it's not really that expensive. So talagang the best. As a Marvel fan, I loved it. So yeah, yun.
Yeah, and that's
And
great. And we're talking about spidey senses. Pag may spidey senses tayo, kailangan natin ng spidey senses to sense disinformation. We've talked about in the
yeah, I love it.
right.
I love the segue.
I know we talked about in the previous episode how we should deal with trolls. But like we should also know how to deal with historical distortion. But that
Mhm.
was only what we consider a dip into the ocean of disinformation, making crashing waves that disrupt our youth wave of change. Ika nga, that was only the tip of the iceberg.
You got that right, Zandy. So now, it is time. Siyasatin natin, kilatisin natin, at saliksikin natin. Let's lock into the deep and rotten roots of disinformation and let's learn how to address it together. Tara! The library is open. Our letter sender is eager for us to hear the truth. Let's put something to put us in the mood. Ayan. Alright, so our letters in this series comes from a mysterious Katkat. Not to be confused, guys, with our previous guest who is a student from a Lumad school, which name was also Katkat. Our friend has a lot to say today about the state of information in the country. So here's the gist. We don't know that much about her, but she says all will be revealed in due time.
Gusto ko yan, very mysterious, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
sense of mystery in who Katkat is. She's mysterious, she's captivating, and she's here to shed light on the truth. Kasama ni Katkat, alamin natin ang katotohanang tinatago ng kasinungalingan. Sa ating mga listeners dyan, send your letters to us. We love mail. Bukas na bukas ang ating online mailbox. That's at secretariat.nyv at gmail.com. Sumali sa ating chikahan at isa-isahin natin ang mga dapat pag-usapan ngayon 2022.
Alright, you guys heard it straight from Zandy. You guys can go. Pwede natin pag-usapan yung mga yan. But now, ready na ba tayo?
I'm
Kasi
ready,
it's now
Migo.
time. Time na, guys. Let's start. So, begin transmission. So, we have Kat's second letter for this episode right here. So, according to Katkat, bakit hindi binabalita ng mainstream media ito? Caption ng screenshot ng article na isang journalist mula sa isang mainstream media company. Well, this is more ironic than Alanis Morissette's song that's supposed to be about irony but doesn't contain any correct examples of irony.
That's interesting. For you, Migo, ano nga bang pinaka tumatak sa'yo na pag-discredit sa media ng troll forums? Or rather, what troll lines have you encountered online? Kasi on our transparency module, we discussed there how troll forums work to discredit Rappler with hashtags like hashtag jail Maria Ressa and the like. Today, Rappler is consistently, hounded by trolls. Have you had experience of trolls hounding?
Speaking of the rapper being hounded by trolls, I remember rapper Maria Ressa stating something about troll farms that really sobrang nagko-connect siya. Nagko-connect siya. It's like different roots, it comes from different roots, and we can really see that troll farms are real. Troll farms are real and they're very prevalent, especially during the election season, especially when it comes to politics. Pero siguro yung troll line that I've really encountered online, considering na parang lagi silang may script talaga, is that ikaw na lang magpresidente.
Oh, yeah.
Lagi ko siyang na-encounter, ba't di na lang ikaw magpresidente? Ba't hindi? Joke. Ba't hindi?
Oh, why not, right?
Why not, di
Migo
ba?
for president.
Migo for president na pala. But I get that a lot. As in, really a lot. Especially when I just try to practice my my freedom of expression, my freedom to criticize the government when I see na may mali silang ginagawa. So, it's not that I'm hating on them, it's just that I'm criticizing their work because it's my right. It's my right to acknowledge these things and call them out for it. Ako bumoboto sa kanila eh. Ako din ang ako din ang
Yeah.
mag-call out sa kanila for that. How about you, Zandy? What anong mga lines na encounter mo online by trolls?
That's interesting kasi ano eh, 'di ba? Ako nga, kayo na lang presidente. Like if we could, we
Right,
we could
right.
try if we had the experience to do so. But for me, trolls kasi also cross ideological lines.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, pag one part of the political spectrum, a troll from a different political spectrum will enter that, right? And so I really can't pinpoint a line that I can think of what trolls use, but literally one thing that I do remember is that they will fight you. I mean, like you
Yeah.
will have that fighting spirit against them, and this
Sobra.
is something I've learned from. Like, have you tried fighting a troll online? Is it
I
something you've
have.
experienced now?
I have tried once or twice before I knew that they get paid each reply.
I know. I'm like, if
Right.
only I could have been paid for my fighting skills as well online, I would have
We'd be
continued
rich,
doing this. I know
right?
we'd be rich. But these trolls continuously hound legitimate news sources, and it's a problem now because it minimizes our ability to see and to properly criticize the sources that we read through. But you know what, Migo, let's continue with what our friend Katkat, our
All
mysterious,
right.
captivating friend Katkat says. She says, or they say, what do we call when the police murders? Post ng Raptor. Who do we trust when the media lies? Comment ng isang netizen.
Actually, sometimes it's very prevalent, especially sa nakikita natin today, 'di ba? Sometimes it's really hard to believe what media says kasi because of all the fake news, right? And especially how trolls contribute to this when they disregard fact-check information, verified information. Kasi yung discourse natin when it comes with trolls, it's really aimed at yung bibigyan ng pamumukain niyang false information, yung totoong information, and they really nurture empty discourse and mudslinging among the people. They attack you with ad hominem, attack you for your profile picture, for your body shape, how you look, which is really outside of the context of the conversation. So it's really hard to communicate with them. It's just pure hate, right?
Mhm. And it gets stressful kasi parang you want to talk about important conversations, like what we're doing now, and sometimes, not sometimes, but oftentimes attacking people for something that isn't connected to the conversation itself, their looks, how their hair looks in the profile pictures, that doesn't contribute at all to the conversation, and it
Yeah.
gets so stressful, right? You're making a straw man out of a conversation that you should be actually focusing on. And in our peace or security and peace module, we also discussed how the Commission on Human Rights, among other offices like the Ombudsman and the Department of Justice, is there to stand for the people when the government
Mm-hmm.
and its entities err and step on human rights, right? And so, I want to ask also, Migo, how important do you think it is for us to uphold the essence of these commissions and these departments?
I believe that is very important kasi they have more likely they have the power to control these kind of stuff eh. They have the power, they can do something about it other than us normal netizens arguing with them. They have the power to really filter these trolls and tanggalin sila sa internet kasi it's so hard that they're there. Pero alam mo, Zandy, I believe that when it comes to troll discoursing, even as much as possible, even though we do know that there are trolls, our objective should still always be to change their mindset and to not self aggrandize or to win any argument. It should always be about educating. Kasi especially when it comes to conversations about politics, when I have conversations, discourse about these kind of stuff, my mindset is always I should not drag their candidate down. I should always drag
Mhm.
my candidate up. Ayokong i-bash yung kanila. I want to show them why I'm going to vote for this specific person. So that, alam mo yun, they get to learn and mas open yung conversation. Hindi sila basta-basta naiinis sa'yo kasi you're parang minamali mo sila. Instead, you're
That's
just basically conversating.
Yeah, and that's great because it's positive campaigning as well. We think about how we're able to change people's minds because a change really happens in the minds of people. You can't impose beliefs on the people. I
Mm-hmm.
think that for me sometimes one of the things that we also get wrong is we tend to impose beliefs onto people. And minsan,
Mm.
that can hurt. That can hurt a
Yeah,
lot.
that's
And
very
so
very
what we
much
want
true.
is to right, and that's what we want is to give proof, give proper sources, again, battle disinformation so that we're able to really enter the minds of people and change them from that perspective. Again, yung idea nga na people from anywhere, from the grassroots, from the middle class, their concerns and the reason why why they want to vote for certain candidates is legitimate. We just have to attack that and recognize how our candidate, or at least, how our views about the world, how our worldview is able to assist them in recognizing the legitimate concerns that they have. But I think, Migo, let's continue now with the letter of Katkat.
All right. Let's continue with Katkat, with what Katkat said. So Katkat said, I see this person likes banter. So I think she's referring to the trolls, right? So let's see what else they like. Let me stalk their profile. Lives in Sapusubo. Works at the Krusty Krab. Has some weird obsession with the Philippines being the next Singapore because of build, build, build. Well, I guess baka kasi patriotic lang sila, di ba? Siyempre, proud Filipino, right? So, lots of online sabong and Rastaman memes. Is that still a thing? Is that Rastaman thing
I
still a
know.
thing, di ba?
Is Rastaman still going around?
Well, that was like, so 5 months ago. So, alam mo yun, galit na galit kay Vice Ganda at kay Sakino and lots of use of the term crappler and a bias CBN, like a lot. Talaga ang dami. And let me scroll a bit more. Well, there it is. I don't trust the media. I think I've seen enough, sabi ni Katkat.
In fairness, may character development na na kaya si Chris Aquino and si Vice Ganda. Pero, ang
True.
trolls, to quote our campaign song, kailangan pa ba? Do we still need trolls?
Di-
Um,
Parang,
that, diba, that's an interesting question because I feel like the answer is no.
di
we
ba?
don't.
Parang they're just making everything worse.
Yes, I think it's
Curiosity just
important.
get paid. No?
Yeah, right? I think, well, because it's important if we want to have good and legitimate conversations over the dinner table, over the internet. Sometimes trolls take part of that, and it gets ruined. Pero may tanong ako sa'yo, Migo.
Yes.
Nagamit mo ba tong lives in sa puso mo, works at Krusty Krab ever?
Alam mo, alam mo, alam mo saan hindi nakakahiya. Pero before I really wanted to work at the Krusty Krab because all of my classmates were working at the Krusty Krab. I think I was in fourth grade. And then I was wondering, paano ko ba papalitan to? Paano ko ba papalitan tong saan ako nagtatrabaho? Pero thinking about it now, I'm just so grateful that I didn't work at the Krusty Krab because if I did, siguro my life would be like Squidward. Like Squidward.
Yeah.
Di ba? Ikaw, parang nagganong ka ba dati or anything else? Like, model at Miss
I also
Universe.
That's great. That's great because kung yung sa Krusty Krab nga daw kung nagtatrabaho ako sa Krusty Krab, you wanted it, but I acted on it. I did.
Ayun.
I placed it. This is something you look back at, and realize that, yeah, you know what, SpongeBob had a big effect on my life. And but I think now, growing up, you realize na, maybe I don't work at the Krusty Krab. I don't have the skills to work in there. Pero ang gusto ko lang rin tanungin, kailan ba magkaka-character development yung mga trolls naman natin. Like, do
True.
you think
Sobrang
it's
true.
possible for them to have character development if they exist this way? I feel that's a good conversation to ask. But just for a bit of light reading as well, it's important to note here that there is a certain line of messaging and responding that troll farms um have been found to exhibit. Buzzwords blur the line between trolls and actual people because these coin terms tend to enter our local lexicons. We can consider them, Migo, listen to this. We can consider them as socialex. Oh, Phil
Socialect.
40. I'm not sure. May ano ba kayong
Socialect.
Yes, social X, academic term. But as we've mentioned, troll farms harbor feelings of distrust and discord among real people. It nurtures a strong critical eye against existing mainstream norms that in itself is good, but disinformation peddlers take it to an extreme by the use of conspiracy and false claims. Minsan, papatanong ka na, nasa parehong Pilipinas ba tayo nakatira?
'Di ba? 'Di ba? Yung mga iba diyan talagang ang laki ng character development. They've already acknowledged their mistakes and they did something about it. Pero our trolls, ano ba yan, guys? It's already 2022. Nag-work pa rin kayo sa Krusty Krab? Come on! Come on! Konting character development naman dyan. 'Di ba? Itong mga troll farms na 'to talagang hindi na sila natuto, hindi sila natuto. And it's sad. Minsan, alam mo, Zandy, honestly, minsan kapag may nakikita ako na parang sobrang illogical nung mga ano nila, illogical nung mga arguments nila, iniisip ko na lang kung troll man to, sana binabayaran ka. Kasi it's so redundant. Sobrang walang kwenta nung sinasabi. It's just mere hate and evil. So, ayun. So, moving on. Moving on naman. So, there's this professor in the College of Mass Communication at UP. Her name is Professor Clarissa David. She mentioned in a press release by the UP Forum that this information is orchestrated, it's funded, it's planned, in politics, it's run by professionals.
This information, this is interesting because this information has been prominent in social media. And the clear example of this is the 2016 Philippine elections. Do you remember that, Migo? How old were we
Yeah,
in 2016
yeah.
elections? I was 15. I was
I
15.
think
That was a long time ago.
6 years ago, I think I was 16. I was 16 by that time.
We were
As hindi pa
close
ako
in
voter
age.
nun. Yeah,
Oh,
hindi pa ako voter
I,
nun. Hindi pa tayo voter nun.
Hindi pa tayo voter nun. But we are first time voters this time around. So, it's
Yeah.
exciting, right? I know it's super exciting na parang back in 2016, we were just, listening to these conversations. And now we're taking part in a conversation as
Yeah.
important as this, right? Because we're part of that, we're part of the people who are gonna,
We're
we're gonna
finally part
vote.
of the demographic, right?
Yes,
So
we're
parang,
finally part of that demographic.
so dapat talagang we make it count. Ito yung first vote natin. So the defining moment of our first vote ever in our life.
And then like the next few years of our lives will be defined by this, and it's just so great because at 15 and at 16, you Migo, we look back and then realize na the 2016 Philippine elections definitely had big levels of
Very
disinformation
big. Very
right,
big.
very big. And in 2018, Facebook executive Katie Harbath called the country patient zero in what many would later consider a fake news pandemic or infodemic across social media in a growing number of democracies.
I
Interesting
think
to,
it's very
I think.
but actually it's kind of true given
Yeah.
given the situation in the Philippines and how gullible we are with the information that we see on social media.
And how easy it
Talagang
is to
there's really
convince.
infodemic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so easy to convince in the Philippines and ako mismo yung maski yung lola ko kapag nakakita siya sa YouTube na mga artista na nag-aano, 'di ba? Na biglang nag-away ganyan. When in fact, it was
Oo.
just gossip lang talaga siya. Share na yan sa ano namin, sa group chat namin. Totoo ba to, apo? Ganyan. Sabi ko, Lola, that's not true. Lola, that's
But
not
it's
true.
so
That's
cute,
just
no? Makes for good conversation with your lola also.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but now, Zandy, punta naman tayo. Let's go back to Katkat, to what Katkat said.
Okay.
So, Katkat said, Well, I'm still not sure if that's a real person. Pero hindi rin naman nakapagtaka kung totoong tao nga siya. According to survey results from the 2020 Digital News Report, overall trust in news is low 27% in the country in the Philippines, which ranks 35th among the 40 media markets covered in the annual project of the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, or RISJ rather, at Oxford University. Full disclosure, I got this data from Vera Files article. From Vera Files article. So do you think that was this distrust natural? Was this distrust natural, or was it man-made? But notably, the concept of media ownership brings to light a bad side of the media, which curtails the truth due to many corporate conflicts of interest. So, alam mo ba na a media outlet may be owned by a business or even a close friend or relative of a politician, with reportage of any news against their friends tempered or even censored to the advantage of their public marriage. It is true that the Lopezes have a stake in ABS-CBN, much like how the Belmontes have a stake in the Philippine Star. So this is much the same with, do you know the issue about Kiboloy owning SMNI? And it seems like a conflict of interest are inherent in journalism. Are you familiar with that issue, Zandy ba? With SMNI and Kiboloy?
Yes, I have heard. Tapos yung about the debates as well in SMNI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there may mga umiikot-ikot na it's like biased. I think it's biased, right?
Mm.
So it's like biased and bias it's biased network SMNI, and he according to the disinformation, he supposedly went on to compare ABS-CBN to the outlet SMNI, saying, unlike us, we do not endorse anyone. Yan went on to claim that in response, Carlos castigated the news anchor, saying that people aren't stupid. So yun, in counterclaim nun, based on what had actually transpired, Velasquez's question was not that SMNI was biased. Instead, he asked the professor, if the owner of the outlet has endorsed a candidate, how is that going to affect the debate? So he did make the comparison, but he did not use the word biased. We, as a network, we do not openly endorse any candidate, he said, with SMNI. So Carlos did criticize the network, but not for the quality of its content. And she also never said that every network has a candidate to endorse. So actually, alam mo yun, we can really see how misinformation really affects a lot, especially even in election debates, right? Ikaw, Sandy, like,
It does.
do you know any of this, like, parang how disinformation really affected an election? Probably could be in school or anywhere, ganyan.
I think disinformation as well, especially now as a political climate, information, even in the past, disinformation about what occurred in the past really affects people's choices in the present. We talk a lot about history, and we can change a lot about history as well. But it's important to recognize that these changes should be looked upon with a critical eye, right? And you know what,
Yeah.
Migo, you talked about this as well, and I want to just say that the media is very much aware
Mm-hmm.
of this,
Yeah.
and it's an open secret naman that the media is owned by corporations now. So for audiences it may be hard to accept this, but now we have come into terms with that. For now, we haven't changed the system, right? It's good to
Yeah.
trust your media, but not too much. Always cross
Exactly.
reference, do your own research, right? It's what we do as responsible citizens, right? Migo, this is
Mm-hmm.
interesting as well because you mentioned a while ago about across social media in a growing, this was mentioned kanina, in what many, this was in 2018, Facebook executive Katie Harbath called the country patient zero across social media in a growing number of democracies. There's an infodemic in a growing number of, interesting word, democracies. Right. So I think I also
Democracy.
want to ask, democracies has a high level of freedom of information. And I think this is going to be connected as well. Don't you think, Migo, na parang, why we
Yeah.
always have to cross-reference, right? Because freedom of information also has with it the responsibility of cross-referencing these information.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So alam mo yun, while that system hasn't changed, while alam mo yun, the government itself is really not doing anything about it. Like siguro may ginagawa sila, but it's not really making enough change, and could also be that some of them are behind it, and there are some companies behind it, some corporations, but we should also do our part to also do our part as internet users, as media consumers. We should cross reference, we should fact check, we should verify the information that we share, that we tell to our families, to our friends. Is it true? Is it harmful? So it's very important that while there are these things, while fake news or disinformation is very much true, it's we can prevent it. We can prevent it by being responsible internet users, media consumers, right?
Exactly. And while we're cross-referencing that, you have to recognize as well that these sources, you have ABS-CBN, you have TV5, you have Philippine Star, you you they are legitimate sources of news,
Mm-hmm.
right? All you just have to is cross-reference them with each other because these are legitimate sources of where you can get your information from. But Migo, let's now move on to the letter of Katkat. Ano pa nga bang sabi ni Katkat? Sabi niya, press freedom has always been under attack in the Philippines. It's been normalized that most attacks aren't even bothered anymore. In a way, parang mas nakakatakot to. Napakarami, pero ito ang ilan sa pinakamainit na pag-atake sa media kamakailan. Oh, what are these itong mga atake laban sa media natin? Well, first we have the ABS-CBN shutdown, unpaid
Very
taxes. It brought about,
controversial.
yes, the media bias, selective reporting. We have Marcoleta's claims. We also have Rappler libel, ownership cases, taxes, media bias, libel cases, and the Nobel Prize conspiracy against Maria Ressa as well.
In counter to the misinformation regarding ABS-CBN, I know that the ABS-CBN, according to the reports, have paid completely from 2016 to 2019, and that meron talagang, and it was just a presumption that yung media bias or selective reporting, it's just hindi parang it's just their assumptions because it was not in their favor.
Yeah, and you also have to think about, I like that what you mentioned, and also just to push forward as well. This is a trickle down effect. You also have people when ABS-CBN, for example, was shut down. So many people lost their jobs.
So
So many
many.
people
Yeah.
lost their jobs, and it was a trickle down effect towards that end. But given this, I also want to ask you, Migo, what else has Katkat said and mentioned in the letter?
Okay, so going back to Katkat, she said, of course, take what the media says with a grain of salt, but last time I checked, these mainstream media outlets are still subject to ethical standards and practices and the law. They don't just flat out lie about everything like that. Self-proclaimed political analyst or motorcycle influencer you saw on YouTube at 2:30 a.m. makes it out to be. So that's very much true. The more people read or come across a piece of information, the more likely they are to believe that it is true, kahit hindi nila chinecheck yan. So this idea is called the illusory truth effect, a phenomenon explored by Pennycook and et al. In 2017.
Interesting. Nelson and Taneja wanted to understand the scope and reach of fake news. In their study, they found that people actively seeking news visited real news sites, whereas those opening fake news sites often merely stumbled upon them through social media.
Nice. So is it people actively seeking news? Talagang do you think Zani that social media should be regulated for fake news? Kasi this is now your vote's response. Definitely not in the interest of defending our freedom of speech. However, The government urgently needs to have a stern talk with the social media providers themselves, as they have for the longest time been the impune wastewater of disinformation that we have been wading on since the dawn of the term itself. Policies need to be set in place, but not at the expense of real people's freedom.
Exactly, and you just as an off tangent, a piece of nuance that we can talk about here. The SIM card registration bill is only short of implementation, but it endangers the freedoms we enjoy online. Members of the transgender community may be forced to use their dead name in registering the SIM card and social media information to government databases. This also leads to a lot of fear on data privacy, which is a very big problem right now, Migo, also on data privacy,
Yeah.
where the Philippine government's various databases are no stranger to the usual breach.
It's
This is a
scary.
scary
Scary.
concept.
It's very
Yeah.
scary.
And I think that that's something that we have to consider. And I think it's interesting that we have this concept of off tangency as well, because their laws and bills that we pass throughout Congress, throughout the legislature, it's important for us to have it considered because, again, we talked about this kanina, the trickle down effect that
Yeah.
happens, when we pass certain legislature. So, you know, Katkat is going there. She's not just mysterious, she's not just captivating, but Katkat is also very, very intelligent. She has been
Mm.
giving us good points to talk about, don't you think, Migo?
Actually, very much, very much. Lumalalim na nga yata yung conversation and we're getting really technical here. And thanks to
I
Katkat, we're
know.
as hosts, we're also learning a lot from her. And for sure
I
our
know.
listeners as well, right?
And it's interesting because for our listeners as well, you're part of this conversation. Migo and I are talking here, and you guys can also take part in that conversation. You can agree, you can disagree, you can go off tangent, give nuances about
You
this, and
you guys have your own
right,
opinions,
yeah.
right?
Kat, you are magical. And speaking of Kat, let's continue on with her letter. She says, they say pala. I wonder who Kat is. To be fair, the press kind of shot themselves in their own foot numerous times sa pagbibigay nila ng plataporma sa mga hindi credible na tao throughout the years, which in turn damage their credibility to an extent. I don't think it's right to call every modern journalist a bayaran or dilawando.
So if like that, so how should we report on these things like political issues, health issues, or daily and lifestyle issues? Kasi codes of ethics among journalists, they usually espouse the values of minimizing harm and prevailing balance and truth in reporting. Kasi it's very much important that I remember I was once in an event wherein a news reporter was the guest speaker and he said that most people really assume that news reporters give out news, they talk, they expose themselves in sa mismong place kung saan sila nagre-report, like news reporters, right? Pag mabagyo, andun sila and whatsoever. But one thing that most people don't really see is that journalists, the most important thing that they do before they report is that they verify the news that they give out. And it's something na talagang hindi natin masyado napapansin sa mga news reporters, but it's actually very important that we know that. Kasi many liars and spoilers have been put on the platform with their erroneous and malicious claims, aiding and giving credibility to this information. Diba? We see so many media outlets, see so many articles, like, I don't know, let's say probably Mo Kauson, ganyan, whatsoever, that they have biased information that they give out. And you know what? According to Kovac and Rosentiel in the Elements of Journalism, the press must now come into terms. The press must now come into terms with its new role in the new online world, where everyone has become a peddler of their own information and truth. The media must now act as the filter and storyteller of the true narrative. However, as we said, conflicts of interest born of media ownership and maybe even the individual journalists, conflicts of interest keep us only a few inches or meters away always from the truth or the most correct narrative. That's where we should come in. We must be responsible in our media diet to act as the check of our free press. It's a job for us and definitely not the government.
That's great. And I just want to sort of go back a little bit. We talked about the things that the media has gone through, the
Yeah.
press have gone through. Ang atake nga laban sa press, right?
Yeah.
Especially
They've
now
been
that we
red
have
tagged.
that. Yeah, they've been
Yeah.
red tagged. They've it's been gone through that. I want to really focus and uh you know zoom into, let's start muna with ABS-CBN shutdown. Migo, we talked about this a while ago. Media bias and selective reporting, and the source of this information actually from here comes from one of the issues that we have. President Rodrigo Duterte, he maintained back then on July 25 that the corporation, ABS-CBN, still has unsettled taxes. And this is something you mentioned kanina, uh, Migo, where you proposed the counterclaim as well that, BIR Assistant Commissioner Manuel Mapoy said during the public hearing that the broadcasting company has paid over 15.3 billion in taxes from 2016 to 2019, right? And so these are different counterclaims that we've had considered as well in terms of disinformation. And that's why, and I just want to ask you also, Migo, how do you think disinformation from this high level of authority can affect people's recognition of truth?
Very much. And remember when ABS-CBN was shut down, it was the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Imagine the vital role that media has during that time. And it was reported all over the world. I think New York Times and so many more very very basta yung mga I forgot the term, pero yung mga bigatin na na news outlets
Mm-hmm.
across the world, in the States, in Asia, outside of Asia. And talaga nakita natin nun. And I really believe that the power that the executive has in terms of this information really affects a lot. And we can see it even to this day. Even to this day of the elections, we can really see how the words of our president, especially when he attacks a personality, really changes the mindset of everyone. Talagang without a doubt, as long as the president says it, they believe it without even fact checking it. And that's very scary kasi if you get red tagged by a person with authority, with power, more likely you're in danger. You're in danger. And fighting against it is one hard thing to do, but a very brave one as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. And truth and, well, information that comes from a very high platform. And I think this is why it's important also for us to recognize that the platform we hold holds power, right? For
Exactly.
anything, right? Whether you're a mother, you're a father, you're a brother, that
Mm-hmm.
platform you hold, people listen to you, people believe you, right? And Migo, you talked about how people believe people from high places as well. I also want to zoom into the Rappler libel ownership cases. This is something you've heard of, Migo,
Yeah.
right? Yung cases against Maria Ressa,
Mm-hmm.
the Nobel Prize conspiracy. One of the sources of this information here, and this is interesting to talk about. Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi accused Rappler and ABS-CBN, among other news organizations, for committing libel on the basis of alleged defamatory stories published about him and the Duterte campaign donor Dennis Uy in being involved in graft, gross negligence, and other wrongdoings. He further contends that these news organizations did the same with actual malice. You've heard of this, Migo, right?
Yeah, I have. And I believe that the counterclaim that they had there was the Supreme Court in Tulfo versus the People clarified how the crime of libel applies to news outlets, journalists, and other professions of the same kind, as well as in the general of the Filipino people, in order to protect their freedom of speech and expression. So talagang it really emphasized that how parang yung mga news outlets and journalists and other professions they also have their freedom of speech and expression comes with the weight that it should be protecting the people, but at the same time it should be handing out information that is correct to inform the people so that they are aware, because that's the power that media has. It keeps us
You're right.
aware. It keeps us aware of our surroundings, what happens and what's happening in the country. And with the case here in Rappler, it's very much really controversial and somewhat kind of sad, right?
Mm, you're right. And I love how you mentioned that that's the job of the media to give us the truth. One thing that I remember, I attended this talk and they said the job of the media isn't to ask the question, is it raining outside? The job of the media is to open the curtain, look out the window, and tell you, yes, it's raining outside, or no,
Yeah.
it's diba? That's the job. It's being able to tell the truth. And I think now we also have to talk about on in that counterclaim, the Bertrand ruling actually says that the Constitution mandates that public officers and employees must at all times be accountable to the people, again, serve them with utmost responsibility, integrity, loyalty, and efficiency, act with patriotism and justice, and lead modest lives. I think this is also connected to what you said, kanina, Migo, to protect freedom of speech and expression. I think there's a second source of this information with what happened to Rappler.
Oh, with yeah, I think what happened there was Wilfredo King, a businessman, filed a criminal case of cybercrime against Maria Ressa and Reynaldo Santos based on the article that rapper posted on King's alleged involvement in human trafficking and drug smuggling. So the article was posted way back in 2012, months before the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012 was enacted into law. So I remember that the Regional Trial Court of Manila found that the Cybercrime Act is still applicable to the subject article based on the following grounds. So even before it was enacted, so it stated here that the article was said to be republished in 2014 when Rappler updated the same to fix a typographical error. So it means that it was published again. And second, that the prescriptive period of 12 years of offenses punished under special laws as provided by RA 3326 should apply, being that the Cybercrime Act does not expressly provide for a prescriptive period.
Interesting to I think it's for also for listeners, it might be a mouthful, something that you guys
Yeah,
should have to
honestly.
listen back to. And this is a conversation that's very important, so it's something that you can listen back to. But as a counterclaim to that, with that source of disinformation, actually, the International Court of Justice gives a call to the Philippine government to reform its laws, actually, so as to remove the possibility of criminal sanction and defamation and libel offenses as in accordance with the international obligations of the Philippines. So I'll just say the first two parts on the constitutionality of the Cybercrime Act. This is under Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. Again, for our listeners, this is very important and pertinent information. So please
Yes.
look back at it. Listen back to this conversation. But for the first two lines, Migo, I can read the first one. Maybe you know the second one. You can say the
Uh,
second one.
I think
The
I
first
remember the one.
one, yeah. So the first one says everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference.
And the second, I remember it stated that everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of his choice.
I love the in the form of art. We have different ways of expressing our opinions, and different people have different mediums for which to express that. And of course, the right
Yeah.
to freedom of expression under Article 19 of this covenant extends to political discourse. Like right now, Migo, we're talking about it. Commentary on public affairs and journalism, The Human Rights Committee concluded in 2012 that the Philippines' criminalization of defamation, including under the CPA, breaches its obligations under the ICCPR. So, again, a mouthful, but something that's very important to consider. Um, just also as a point of just to connect to that, in Disseny versus Secretary of Justice, the court mentioned that the ICCPR states that although everyone should enjoy freedom of expression, its exercise carries with it special duties and responsibilities. Free
Responsibilities.
speech is not absolute, it is subject to certain restrictions as may be necessary and provided by law. Migo, what was that Uncle Ben said as the Spider-Man in this conversation? What was that Uncle Ben said?
Uncle Ben said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And you know what, Zandy? I really love. I remember. I recall something that my professor taught us in our law class, because I have a law class in college, and this was one of our topics, and she mentioned that no matter, like, even though we do have this right from the constitution to freely express ourselves and alam mo yun, just be ourselves, meron pa rin mga pipigil sa atin eh. Meron pa rin tarang to our certain extent. Like, you can't just freely express yourself, like just go out naked just because you wanted to, because you feel like that's how you express yourself. Meron pa rin limitations, and if it affects another person, or if it's makakapag defame ng ibang tao, that's something that you should think about, and it can be punished by the law.
That's interesting because I also want to add in where our rights end is where our responsibilities begin.
Starts.
And
Yeah, yeah.
although, right, tama ba yun? Tama ba yung pagkasabi ko? Non-verbatim. But that's what's in my brain right now. But it's true because it might be unwritten, but we have to recognize that the rights provided to us right now, for instance, right, we're in a democracy. We have the freedom of speech, very popular mantra in democracy. It also has with it as, nakakonect sa kanya eh. Parang niyang tail yan eh. Now, we have to be responsible about the things that we say
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Kasi
yeah.
yeah,
Kasi.
kasi yeah, pero kasi everything that we say, talagang we should really think about it first. I mean, we do have our freedom of expression, we do have the autonomy, we do have the freedom to express ourselves in the ways that we like, but we must
Mhm.
also see to it that how can this affect other people, rather, and if it does, and if it leads to chaos, then might as well think about it first, because you can be punished for it.
Exactly. And ang continuation nga ng sabi ni Katkat, sabi niya, man, this is a tough time to be a defender of truth. Why did I even sign up to be a fact checker? End of transmission. Nakapagod nga
Grabe.
talaga.
Grabe. Ang daming nasabi ni Katkat, and there were so many
Yes.
topics that we were able to dive in, and honestly, even though it was a lot, it's a load to take in, but it's something that we should be very aware about. Kasi
Yes.
these things, kahit na it's parang sobrang nakaka-stress, and kahit nakaka-stress siya, actually it is nakaka-stress with all the things that's going on in the Philippines, in our government, in our communities. It's important that we are aware, so that we can also have a call to action and what to do about it, and how we can teach other people to be knowledgeable about it as well, right?
Yes, because it's a tough time to be a defender of the truth. It's a tough time to be part of this battle, but it is a battle worth fighting for.
Yes, I love that. It is a battle worth fighting for. And ayun guys, so that was the message. Now it is time to pass it on. All right. So I hope what Kat shared with us today fueled you guys to vet your sources well and to consume media more mindfully.
Exactly, para makatulong sa ating pagsisiyasat para sa katotohanan, here are some guidelines on how to spot and address this information online and in your community.
All right. So first up, we have just like what we said in the previous episode, first is, of course, keep critical. Keep critical. So guys, while today's culture of conspiracy is fueled by a long and brutal campaign to discredit our mainstream information providers, there is something essential we must extract and bring to light in this new practice. So guys, always remain critical of the information that you receive and also with the information that you share. So make sure that you guys check your sources and as well check your sources. So learn to differentiate between primary sources from while the event was happening and secondary sources processed from after the event happened. And tertiary sources, even up to the tertiary sources, guys, even up to the tertiary sources written with accounts about the event.
Exactly. You have to, kailangan isa puso natin yan. You have to be critical. We have to recognize that the truth is not an easy, kasi, looking at these
Yeah.
sources is not easy, right? But the truth is not easy to gain. Sabi na nila, no pain, no gain. That's what they
No
say.
pain, no.
No pain, no gain. But our second point naman here that you guys, also for me and Migo, something that we have to remember is to discredit the 3Ds. 3Ds. Discredit and deplatform disinformation. Disinformation peddlers have to be neutralized. If in social media, refrain from giving them any traffic or metrics. Screenshot
Mhm.
the disinformation, refrain from
Mhm.
sharing, quote tweeting, liking, or replying to them. Just don't give them the attention that they so want and need. It has been revealed by many studies that social media algorithms cater strongly to disagreements and the polarization of people of opposing opinions. Iwasang mag-away, you guys. Let's always go back to
Yes.
starting constructive conversations. This is all the more reason for us to start conversations on the ground. Without the help of
Mhm.
the internet, disinformation spreads into communities with impunity. Consider spreading materials that counter and discredit disinformation and strengthen the narrative of truth. That leads us to our final tip for today. Migo, ano nga ba ang pinakahuling tip natin?
Our last step for today is, of course, amplify. Amplify. So, guys, we cannot claim to be experts in every field, nor do we want to. We can't be Mr. Everything. So, let's foster this culture of critical thought by sharing the truth in any way that we can. So, our letter sender, Katkat, will be sharing materials you can share with your community on ground, especially with what we've talked about. So thank you so much, Katkat, for sending that letter.
Yes, the mysterious, captivating, intelligent Katkat. You know what? This
Sobrang
is
wise.
interesting, right? Sobrang wise ni Katkat. You're bringing about all this new points to ponder upon. I just also want to add on this point of amplifying. Migo, you talked a while ago about um on people's repeated exposure to fake news, yung
Yeah.
illusory truth effect. I remember a quote. It's non-verbatim. I always forget the verbatim versions of the quotes I give. But one of the things that they mentioned there, very important, is a truth. Well, parang a point said often, a lie said often, eventually becomes the truth. And I think this
Yeah.
is, yeah, and this is something that's very important that we have to consider, because if you continue amplifying things that shouldn't be amplified, eventually people will recognize it as the truth. But I have a question for you, Migo, before we end this. Oh my gosh. And the comment apparently is from the propagandist of Hitler, not a good person to get
Not a
to
good
get
first.
points from, but he's Hitler's propagandist,
Yeah.
Joseph Goebbels, I believe, and that's what he said, and it's true. If you
Actually,
continue
too.
spreading all these lies, this is it will people will eventually take it for the truth, even if it isn't. So I have a question for you, Migo, before we end this, before we reach the tail end of our conversation. For you, how can you fight this information in your own way?
This information, I believe that in my own way, we can fight it by other than cross-checking our sources, is that we can fight this information by verifying the things that we share. Kasi ako Zandy, honestly, I'm kind of like a memer on Facebook. You know, memers, we share
Yeah.
memes and funny things. But I also share information that that includes yung mga bagay na is very much relevant to today's society, especially
Mhm.
with politics.
Mhm.
And I make sure na whenever I share, I read I read the whole article, check the sources, and not just the headline. Because most people,
Yes.
sobrang confusing ng headlines eh. 'Di ba? Like,
Mhm.
sobrang confusing niya to the point that when you read the headline and it becomes so enticing, just because you've been so enticed to it, you share it without even checking the whole article, which causes more misinformation, makes more people confused, which causes more chaos, right? So it's
Yes.
important, guys, that you verify these things. You verify these things that you share. Cross-checking
Mhm.
it is one thing, but before you share it, and sharing it is another. So that's how we
Yes.
can really stop this disinformation. That's how we can prevent it. And ayun, that's honestly that's what I believe. And there are other things like joining groups that prevent disinformation, but when we share stuff, that's something to take note of. And ayun.
That's interesting also. Ang ganda nun kasi, I also want to add there, Migo, you're a memer, and there are memes on Facebook that are very good actually. Sometimes memes are great ways to push forward your idea in politics. It's easier
Yeah,
to
so
remember, it's
yeah,
funny,
true.
right? And magandang process yun to gain information as well. But again, your memes have to be correct, you guys. But again, memes are good.
May mga funny naman na memes like mayors promoting naging uso siya ngayon eh. Like ano mga politics promoting WWE wrestlers. It's so funny,
Yeah,
it's so funny. It's so
it is.
funny and wala lang, may mga ganong bagay. It's something na siguro hindi mo naman kailangan i-fact check pa yun kasi. Pero
Oo.
there could be times that, di ba, sobrang gullible natin. May mga times na baka maniwala talaga sila. But ayun,
Yes, totoo.
ayun, so yun yung letter sa atin ni Katkat for today's episode. At guys, kami ni Zandy, me and Zandy, we're just your voices for today. So kayo ang magiging kinatawan niya sa pagsusulong ng katotohanan sa ating komunidad. So guys, we are counting on you. We are counting on you, dear listeners. So, all right. So, I guess that's it. We're now at the tail end of our discussion, and while we're close to our episode for today, may paonting plug portion muna tayo. I think Zandy, you first.
Yes, all I have to plug really is my Instagram account. If you guys want to see whatever's going on in my life outside of this podcast, that's at Chrysostomato on Instagram.
Yun. So you can also support her sa upcoming volleyball season ng UAAP because she is the UAAP correspondent. So watch out for her. She'll be on TV and I'll be supporting her as well. The amazing Zandy. While for me, guys, please do support my podcast. Basically, I talk about self-help and self-improvement. It's called Life on Pause, and you guys can also catch me on my socials at Migo Austria on IG and on TikTok. So, guys, this special episode series would not be possible if not for the vital support given to us by hashtag FactsFirstPH. So, sabi nga ni Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa, without facts, you can't have truth.
Tama. Who will you vote for if you don't have the facts? How many times have you been attacked online because you challenged a lie? You are not alone. To protect our elections and our democracy, we need to protect the facts.
Join more than 100 groups, coalitions, media, civil society organizations, business groups, the church, research groups, and legal organizations that are working together around a first of its kind initiative called hashtag FactsFirstPH.
Yes, facts. Hashtag Facts First PH brings together various sectors that are committed to promoting truth in the public space and exacting accountability from those who harm it with lies.
Remember to ask us through our email address to know more about this network.
At ganon, you guys, we will see you out there. Okay, join us in the series of episodes as we read each of Katkat's transmissions of truth and eventually figure out sino nga ba si Katkat.
Ang mysterious, wise, and sobrang talino na si Katkat. So ngayong 2022, ang panawagan ng Now You Vote ay kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ang mananaig.
It is time to exchange your views and knowledge with your peers, engage your communities and candidates for a meaningful change beyond the ballot, and commit to your right to suffrage as your vote defines the Philippines of our generation and maybe the next.
So make sure that you guys stay tuned for that. And bukas na bukas ang aming online tanggapan, of course, for youth activation sessions and resources to help you guys make your big decisions and to nurture your important conversations. Remember to email us at secretariat.nyv@gmail.com.
Again, that's secretariat.nyv@gmail.com. And you can now also join our Discord server. Talk to us, guys. It's great makiugnay, makipagtalakay, at magboto kasama ng inyong kapwa kabataan sa discord.gg/nowyouvotehub. Again, that's discord.gg/nowyouvotehub.
Make sure that you guys join us in our Discord server. And again, this has been your host, Migo, together with my co-host, the amazing ZanD, reminding you guys to participate in 2022's most important conversation and to make your 2022's biggest decision on May 9, 2022. 2022. See you guys
Malapit
on
na.
the next 2020. See you guys on the next episode.
See you guys!